Hi there! In this video I'm going to show you how to create your own beginner-friendly tropical terrarium. Let's get started. Before we dive right in, let's quickly run through a list of things you're gonna need. A clear glass container, small pebbles, gravel or mica to build a drainage layer, a separation layer to prevent the substrate from clogging the false bottom, fine ground charcoal or activated carbon, the substrate for the plants to grow in, a selection of tropical plants, moss, and some decorative bits to make up the hardscape like stones, driftwood and twigs. Trust me, having everything ready before you start makes your life building the terrarium much easier. The first step is selecting the perfect container for your project. There are many options, ranging from charming little glasses over storage containers to vintage looking cookie jars. The key is finding a container that is spacious enough to allow your plants to grow in, but not so big that you overwhelm your terrarium with unused space. Also, take a closer look at your container. Vases or cookie jars might have seams or other imperfections in the glass, so decide on the primary viewing side where these won't distract from the overall aesthetic. For this build I decided to go with this glass storage container. It has a vertical profile but still is not too narrow, and it has a screw-on lid with a window in it, which will make it easier to light it up at the end. Now we'll start with the drainage layer. Pour a layer of mica or small pebbles into the bottom of your container. This prevents water from collecting in the substrate. My go-to drainage material is pumice, because it's much lighter than pebbles and can soak up water due to its porosity. To prevent the substrate from clogging up the drainage layer, I like to use a piece of window screen as a separator. I also used wheat barrier fabric in the past, or even just dried leaves that I collected outside. The finer the material used for the drainage layer is, the more likely it is that you can even get away without needing a separator at all. Just remember, a well-drained base is key to a long-lasting moisture balance in your terrarium. Next, sprinkle a thin layer of activated carbon on top of your pebbles. This helps keep your terrarium fresh by absorbing impurities. If you don't want to invest in this, you can use ground charcoal instead as the next best thing. Or even skip this layer entirely, as in a plant-only terrarium like this, it is probably not that crucial after all. Now add a generous layer of soil on top. The soil should be deep enough to support the plant's roots while leaving flexibility for terrain adjustments later. For easier setups like this, I use a 50-50 mix of regular potting soil and orchid bark with no problems. Over time, everyone develops their own preferred soil recipe anyway. You can experiment with adding sand, dried sphagnum moss or perlite to the mix. Also remember, you might want to address the needs of different plants. A cactus will require a much different substrate than, let's say, a bunch of swamp plants. The general aim, however, is to have a well-draining substrate that provides the necessary nutrients for the plants without compacting too much. The topography of the soil layer also provides the base for the overall layout of the scape. It is usually a good idea to slope it up to the back of the terrarium to support the impression of depth. Before we start planting, it's time to set the hardscape. For this setup I decided to use this part of driftwood as the main hardscape element, since it plays well with the vertical form factor of the container. I usually decide for one central piece of hardscape that I place first, and then everything else develops around that. With the main hardscape in place, we can finally start planting. The plants I selected are smaller tropical plants that will thrive in a high humidity environment. You have to keep in mind that plants that you can find outside might not grow as well in a closed setup like this, except if you live in a tropical country, of course. The moss is sourced from my backyard, but I made the experience that moss usually grows better in a moist environment. I cleaned out the roots and cut them to a reasonable length if necessary. For easier planting, I like to create little pockets in the soil where I want the plant to live, and then gently grab the roots with the tweezers and push them into the substrate. When planting, try to choose the placement with a balanced overall picture in mind. Usually that means planting taller plants towards the background of the setup. But take your time and don't be afraid to try different layouts before you decide for the final placement of each plant. But keep in mind that plants tend to grow, and what might look sparse in the beginning will grow in nicely, while what might seem just right now will be completely overgrown in only a few weeks. With all the larger plants in place, now it's time to place the moss. I put some of the moss in the front and around the wood to form a little moss carpet. But I also love it when moss starts to overgrow the hardscape. That's why I make sure to push some moss in little gaps of the wood. I hope that at least one will start spreading out over time. Finally, give your terrarium a light misting to settle everything and place the final decorative elements like smaller rocks, twigs or botanicals to round off the overall look. To create a self-sustaining environment, add enough water to keep the substrate moist, but not so much that there is a significant amount of water visible within the drainage layer. Gently close the lid and place the terrarium in a spot with indirect sunlight. If you notice a lot of condensation building up, open the lid from time to time to let out some of the excess water. After a little bit of balancing in the beginning, there should not be too much watering be necessary. In a setup like this that contains wood elements in a high moisture environment, some molding might occur in the beginning. To counter that, you can open up the container to reduce humidity, or you decide to go the bioactive route and add some springtails that will feed off mold and other decaying plant matter. And there you go! Now you know everything you need to get started with your very own closed tropical terrarium. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more content like this, leave a like and consider subscribing. See you next time.